Just hours ago, everything changed. One update, one refresh, and suddenly, Music Bank's voting rankings flipped in a way no one in Korea was prepared for. Fans stared at their screens, refreshing again and again, convinced it had to be a glitch. But it wasn't. Korean social media exploded within minutes. Shock, disbelief, panic, and anger, all colliding at once. This wasn't a slow rise or a predictable chart climb. This was a takeover, an outsider surge that exposed cracks in a system long thought untouchable. And now the industry is scrambling because what's happening right now isn't just about one win. It's a power shift. And this is only the beginning. To understand why this moment has sent shockwaves through Korea, you first need to understand what Music Bank voting actually represents. Music Bank isn't just another weekly music show. It's one of K-pop's most respected battlegrounds, where numbers decide legitimacy and trophies define careers. Every win is calculated through a strict scoring system designed to measure both popularity and industry support. The score is split across several categories. Digital points track streaming and downloads, favoring acts dominating Korean platforms. Album sales reward physical buying power, usually controlled by established fandoms. Broadcast score reflects how often an artist appears on KBS content, subtly favoring groups with strong agency relationships. And finally, fan voting, where domestic and international fans mobilize in real time to push their favorite artists to the top. For decades, this system has quietly benefited artists from Korea's Big Four agencies. These companies dominate radio play, TV exposure, retail distribution, and domestic streaming. As a result, Music Bank wins often follow a predictable pattern: big agency in, trophy out. Breaking into that circle without industry backing is almost impossible. That's why winning Music Bank isn't just symbolic. It signals acceptance. It tells advertisers, producers, and the public that an artist belongs at the top tier. So when the rankings suddenly shifted, when an outsider surged through a system designed to filter them out, it wasn't just surprising, it was historic, and it forced everyone to ask an uncomfortable question. If this system can be disrupted once, what else can fall next? SB19's story doesn't begin in Seoul boardrooms or billion-dollar training centers. It begins outside Korea, far from the traditional K-pop machine. No Big Four agency, no guaranteed broadcast slots, no industry safety net. Just 5 artists, relentless ambition, and a fan base that refused to be ignored. While most K-pop groups spend years locked in the trainee system, SB19 built their rise differently. They leaned into digital platforms, viral performances, and raw authenticity. Their growth wasn't manufactured through exposure. It was earned through repetition, connection, and trust. Song by song, clip by clip, their presence spread across borders. At the center of this rise is A-tin, their fiercely loyal international fandom. Highly organized, data-driven, and relentless, A-tin treats every vote, stream, and share like a mission. Where traditional fandoms rely on domestic dominance, A-tin operates globally, moving faster and wider than industry models expected. That's why Korea underestimated SB19. They didn't fit the formula. No Korean agency pedigree, no familiar media narrative. To many insiders, they were easy to dismiss as a temporary online trend. But trends fade. Systems don't prepare for movements. SB19 isn't entering K-pop as newcomers asking for permission. They're entering as disruptors, proving that in a digital-first era, power doesn't belong solely to companies. It belongs to fans who know how to use it. And Music Bank just became the stage where that truth could no longer be ignored. The moment it happened, no announcement was made, no warning. Just a routine Music Bank voting update, until fans noticed something was wrong, or at least something they had never seen before. The rankings refreshed, and SB19 had surged forward, leaping past established Korean acts that normally dominate without resistance. Screenshots spread instantly. People refreshed again. And again. The numbers didn't change back. What made the shock worse was how fast it happened. This wasn't a gradual climb over days. It was a sharp spike driven almost entirely by fan votes, arriving in a compressed window that overwhelmed expectations. SB19's voting numbers didn't just increase, they exploded, creating narrow margins that suddenly flipped into clear leads. One update, and the hierarchy collapsed. Side-by-side comparisons told the story brutally. Groups backed by major agencies, acts with heavy broadcast presence, massive domestic exposure, and years of institutional support were suddenly trailing. Not by opinion, by math, by the same rules everyone else plays under. Fans watching live described it as unreal. Comment sections flooded with timestamps, exclamation marks, and disbelief. Korean entertainment reporters began quietly monitoring the data. International fans celebrated in real time, while others waited for the system to correct itself. It never did. This wasn't a fluke. The scale was too large, the coordination too precise. SB19 didn't sneak ahead. They forced the system to acknowledge them. And in doing so, they exposed how vulnerable even the most entrenched ranking structures are when a global fandom moves as one. The takeover wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. Within minutes, Korean online spaces ignited. On major forums, search terms linked to Music Bank and SB19 shot up the trending lists. Some posts were stunned admiration. How is this possible? Others were pure disbelief. And then came the backlash. Supporters praised the transparency of the system. They argued that votes are votes, regardless of where they come from. Screenshots of official Music Bank rules circulated, highlighting that international fan voting is explicitly allowed. To them, SB19's rise wasn't cheating. It was proof that the rules were finally being used to their full extent. But another reaction quickly took over: panic. Accusations followed. Claims of foreign fandom manipulation flooded comment sections. Some framed the result as an invasion of a Korean space, arguing that domestic shows should remain domestically controlled. The tone shifted fast, from confusion to defensiveness. Debates turned hostile. Supporters accused critics of moving goalposts. Critics accused broadcasters of losing control. Threads were locked, comments deleted, new ones reposted. Underneath the arguments wasn't just a dispute about votes. It was a deeper cultural tension about ownership, influence, and identity in K-pop's global era. What terrified many wasn't SB19 themselves. It was the precedent. If an international fandom could mobilize like this once, it could happen again. And suddenly, Music Bank wasn't just a music show. It was a mirror, reflecting an industry struggling to accept that K-pop no longer belongs to Korea alone. Once the shock wore off, the conversation shifted to one word: receipts. Did SB19 actually break the system, or did the system finally work exactly as designed? Fans began pulling raw data, timestamps, and official Music Bank guidelines to answer one question: was this win legitimate? The numbers told a clear story. SB19's surge came primarily from fan vote percentages, which spiked dramatically within the allowed voting window. No suspicious gaps, no irregular timing, just volume. International voting, often misunderstood, is explicitly permitted under Music Bank rules. Votes are counted equally as long as they pass verification. That rule wasn't changed, it wasn't bent, it was simply used at full capacity. As scrutiny intensified, no violations were confirmed. No votes were disqualified. No emergency corrections were issued. And that silence from broadcasters spoke louder than any press release. If something was wrong, it would have been fixed. It wasn't. Veteran fans pointed out an uncomfortable truth. This wasn't even the first time international fandoms influenced Korean music shows. Past wins by global acts had already proven the door was open. SB19 didn't open it. They walked through it with force. Industry watchers summed it up bluntly: this was inevitable. Digital platforms erased borders years ago, but voting systems never adapted. SB19 simply revealed the math behind the illusion. The system wasn't broken. The expectations were. Behind closed doors, this is the part that truly scares the industry. SB19's rise signals a loss of control, not over charts, but over narratives. For decades, major agencies shaped success through access, broadcast slots, partnerships, and domestic dominance. That leverage just weakened. The power has shifted to fandom mobilization, and not the kind agencies can easily manage. International fans are no longer bonus points added after domestic success. They are the engine. Organized, data-literate, and emotionally invested, global fandoms now move faster than traditional promotion cycles. Broadcasting systems look especially exposed. Built for a Korea-first audience, they're struggling to process a global one. The infrastructure wasn't designed for millions of coordinated overseas votes arriving simultaneously, and it shows. The fear isn't about SB19 winning once. It's about what happens next. More international acts will study this blueprint. More fandoms will follow it. And once control slips, it's nearly impossible to reclaim without rewriting the rules. That's the nightmare scenario. A future where Korean labels no longer decide who dominates Korean stages. Because if non-Korean artists can win on Korean shows by the rules, then the question isn't if domination shifts, it's how fast. The numbers were public. The rankings were official. Yet the media response told a different story. In Korea, major entertainment outlets hesitated. Headlines avoided SB19's name. Articles focused on intense competition rather than the result itself. When the win was mentioned, it was often buried halfway down the page, framed as a statistical anomaly rather than a seismic shift. This wasn't outright denial, it was selective framing. Coverage emphasized the closeness of scores instead of who led them. Some reports highlighted technical aspects of voting, subtly suggesting confusion rather than clarity. The implication was clear: acknowledge the data without amplifying the disruption. International media took the opposite approach. Global outlets celebrated SB19 as proof of K-pop's evolving ecosystem. Headlines framed the moment as historic, even inevitable. To them, this wasn't a problem to manage. It was a story to amplify. The contrast was stark. Domestically, restraint. Globally, recognition. That gap exposed an uncomfortable truth. Korean media is still negotiating how much power it's willing to acknowledge beyond its borders. Attempts to downplay the impact only fueled curiosity. Fans noticed what wasn't being said. Silence became its own message. Because when a system avoids naming the disruptor, it's usually not because the moment is small, but because it's too big to control. Now comes the dangerous part. What happens after the shock fades? Industry insiders are already whispering about rule changes, voting caps, region-based weighting, adjustments framed as fairness rather than restriction. None confirmed, but the speculation alone reveals how unsettled the system is. International acts are expected to face increased scrutiny, every vote examined, every surge questioned. Success that once triggered celebration may now trigger investigations. SB19 in particular will be watched closely, not because of wrongdoing, but because of precedent. Future appearances on Korean music shows hang in the balance. Will SB19 be welcomed as proof of global reach, or quietly limited to avoid repeat disruption? The answer will signal whether the industry chooses reform or retaliation. Fans aren't waiting passively. A10 is already preparing, archiving rules, documenting votes, bracing for backlash. They understand that winning once is easier than winning twice under pressure. The next comeback cycle raises the stakes even higher. Another surge would confirm this wasn't luck. It would force permanent change. And that's why this moment matters so much. Because the future of Music Bank, and who it truly belongs to, will be decided by what happens next. This was never just about one trophy or one shocking voting update. What happened with SB19 exposed something much bigger. The old boundaries of K-pop are no longer holding. For years, success was filtered through a Korea-first system. Domestic charts, domestic broadcasts, domestic approval. That model just cracked in public. The idea of Korea-only dominance is collapsing under its own weight. K-pop is global in consumption, global in fandom, and now global in power. When millions of fans outside Korea can organize, mobilize, and legally influence outcomes, the center of gravity shifts. Companies no longer fully decide who wins. Broadcasters no longer fully control the narrative. Fans do. SB19 didn't ask to be crowned. They followed the rules, activated their fandom, and let the numbers speak. In doing so, they became a symbol, not just of international success, but of a new era where passion outperforms privilege and coordination beats corporate backing. This moment will be studied, copied, and feared, because systems survive only as long as people believe they're unbreakable. Music Bank proved otherwise. And here's the warning no one in the industry wants to say out loud. If this can happen once, it can happen again.